Hello, everybody. Welcome back. You guys should have finished up your Declaration of Independence. So we have become a new nation. We have split from Great Britain, and at this point in time, we have to figure out what to do with our government. And the first step is drafting a constitution. So the creating of the constitution, and what I mean by that is not our original constitution that we are under currently today. The first constitution for 11 years is going to be known as the Articles of Confederation, which is a bit different than what we originally intended it to be. Getting started here, the Articles of Confederation, we needed a functioning government during the Revolution. So we kind of modeled our governments after the governments we've been running for over 100 years, which were the colonial governments. And one thing that we were majorly scared of during this time was too much power that the king and queen had. So what we really wanted to do is we really wanted to have power for each and every individual state, and those were the 13 states at the time. The founders were fearful of concentrated power due to their past experiences that during this time. They didn't want somebody that was going to rise to power like an abusing president that was going to put everybody down, take away from our rights during this time. And what they really wanted to do was protect those natural rights that they had. So we almost turned into 13 individual countries at this time under the Articles of Confederation, which posed some major problems, and we're going to get into that. A limited government. The Articles established a firm league of friendships among the states. I'm going to show you a picture here in a couple slides. In order for a bill to be passed, in order for a bill to become a law, 9 of the 13 votes had to happen. If you were in my class during this time, and we talked about the social consensus, or you guys saw that in chapter 1 when we talked about we needed a consensus to have this done. Imagine 13 people coming together and 9 of the 13 agreeing on something for a law in order to be passed for every state to follow. And states didn't want that. States wanted to have separate laws. They wanted to be able to freely act upon these things. So in order for a change to the Articles of Confederation, they needed to have 13 of 13 votes. So you tell me how many times that actually happened where they were actually amending or changing the Articles of Confederation. Almost never. 13 of 13 people to agree on something, good luck, right? So like I said, people are people no matter what time period they're in. It's still going to be very difficult for them to agree on stuff. So let's look at the structure of the Articles of Confederation. They had a single house, a legislative body, one lawmaking body. 13 states came together. The 13 states had representatives, which was about 3 to 5 of them, and they would come to Congress and they would vote on things. The problem is after a while they started to really not care about going to these things, which posed a lot of problems, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Each state had one vote, regardless of population size. So even though Virginia was the biggest state, they had one vote. And some of the other smaller states had one vote. So it didn't matter based off population how many people lived there. So there was an equal representation when it came to the voting process. Congress was given sole authority to govern over the country. An executive committee oversaw government when Congress was not in session. And Congress would establish temporary courts to hear disputes among the states. So that's one of the powers that they had, were the disputes among the states. And I look at it like this, and I drew this on the board and I posted it on here. And I always show my kids this. It's like all the states had the powers, okay? All the states had their own individual power and basically their own individual countries at the time. And they could make their own laws, and they could trade by themselves. So some states were going to be richer or have more money than other states. And then you have this itty little bitty tiny central government in the middle. All right, which basically had no power to do anything. They couldn't even tax. So they had no money. They didn't have a standing military. Each state would call a militia for their military if they needed it, or hire private militias, okay, during this time. So each state had different money. Some states were really rich and some states were really poor, and it posed a lot of problems. Each state could trade with foreign nations by themselves. So the southern states, because they had slavery and they had all this farming and the crops, we're going to be richer in a sense during this time. Okay, so it posed a lot of problem. Some powers that were denied to the central government. The central government, looking back here, this is the central government. The central government had no power to raise funds for an army or navy. So we didn't have a military. If a foreign nation would attack us, we'd call the troops, and we'd get together just like we did during the Revolutionary War. It worked for us. We defeated the most powerful country in the world, and we get together and we fight them. We had no power to tax. We had no power to impose tariffs, and we had no power to collect any duties. We had no executive branch to enforce laws. We had no power to control trade among the states. The states could control that. They could trade with each other. They could trade with foreign countries. So like I said, some states had more money than others. They had no power to force states to honor any kind of obligations, and they had no power to regulate the value of any currency. It was state-to-state currency. There was no federal currency at this time, which was a major issue. So we were like 13 small countries that that were under the Articles of Confederation. We were not a United States at this time. We just had a firm league of friendships. Some accomplishments under the Articles of Confederation: administered the 7-Year War effort. We negotiated the Treaty of Paris with Great Britain in 1783, effectively ending the Revolution. And we established the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, expanding the territory of our country today. The large territory lying between the Great Lakes and the Ohio River. Congress passed a law that set rules for creating new states, granted limited self-government for the developing territory, and prohibited slavery in the region, which is later on going to become a big issue in the United States of America under the Constitution. Trade with foreign nations was a major issue. Our federal government couldn't trade with foreign nations. We could not finance a nation because each state had their own currency. Like I said, foreign relationships, because Great Britain did not want to trade with us. If they did trade with us, it would be for cheap, unwanted goods. And interstate relations, state-to-state relations had major conflicts because of the amount of money that was coming in and out for both states. Problems with the trade under the Articles: the U.S. no longer the favorite trading partner of Great Britain, like I said on the previous slide. U.S. exports to British ports had to be on British ships, which was a major issue. It's going to lead to a war during John Adams' presidency, and it's going to lead to a lot of pirating, British ships pirating our ships that were trying to trade or trying to trade with other countries, coming in, stealing our ships, and either killing them or saying you have to come back to Great Britain and work for us, or you're going to be enslaved or killed. Leads to a war. Many U.S. produced goods were barred from British ports. Britain sent vast majorities of cheap goods to the U.S., which were no good to us. The potential remedy: established a tariff on British goods, and the weakness in the Articles of Confederation really prevented a solution because our federal government couldn't do anything. So just like I said, some problems that were looming during this time, that powers were not, these are some of the powers that were not given to the central government. The central government could not wage war, so how would we ever have war periods? Not supposed to be there. Make treaties, send diplomatic representatives to anywhere, like how would we do that? We could not borrow money. And I'm sorry, those were powers that were given to the central government. I'm not going to do this PowerPoint over. So these were powers that are given to the central government. We could wage war. I'm sorry. Oh, man, I messed up. We can wage war. We could make treaties. We could send diplomatic representatives, just like we sent Thomas Jefferson to France. And we send Ben Franklin. Jefferson. I think Jefferson, one of the two. Jefferson was the ambassador to Great Britain. Franklin was to France. Jefferson was to Great Britain. I have to check that. It was one of the two, either one of the two. So we did send foreign representatives during this time, and borrowing money. We could borrow money. The problem was that the states never wanted to give us money. So the powers not given to the central government, so sorry about that. Number one, we could not regulate commerce. We could not tax. To finance any of its decisions, Congress had to wait for taxes voted on by each state and given to Congress by the states, which never happened. And they had no executive powers to force any laws. So there was major flaws in the Articles. We were under it for 11 years, but the straw that broke the camel's back finally was a thing called Shays' Rebellion, okay? And you guys are going to do your Q&A on Shays' Rebellion. You can see here fights to take over the Federal Arsenal, Springfield Federal Arsenal. In the summer of 1786, gathered the name of Captain Daniel Shays, a Massachusetts farmer and Revolutionary War veteran, led other farmers in an uprising against state taxes, imprisonment for debt, and lack of paper money. In January 1787, when Shays and his followers attempted to seize weapons from the Springfield Armory, the state militia had to break Shays' rebellion. There was no standing federal army. So you tell me, if there was any kind of uprising during this time in the country, there could be no federal military to come in and stop this from happening. We've seen in history when we've had riots in the United States of America, the federal government or the National Guard gets called in. It's all during the Civil Rights Movement. And heck, we've even seen it a little here in 2020 where the federal military may have to get called in. We have the National Guard help for hurricane relief and disasters that are happening all over the country. Tornadoes come in, our federal government goes out to help. So there was no sort or any kind of this. So when the state's militia in Massachusetts were the ones that were rebelling, who are you going to call? The state militia from New York? Okay, or the state militia from PA? No, we're not going to go help Massachusetts. That's not our business. They're their own state. Let them go. So it was like 13 small countries during this time. So you can see that we were so consumed with other countries coming in and trying to take us over. We were not really we never thought that there would be any problems within our own state. So when problems happen within our own country at this time or in our own states, who is going to stop that? Were we going to call a separate state's militia to come in? No, these guys were farmers, blacksmiths, woodworkers. They weren't going to just drop up and, say, hey, I'm going to go leave my family for a different state. Okay. No, you better be paying me a good amount of money to come over there. Maybe I'll come then. So you saw a major problem with this, and Shays' Rebellion really brought this to the attention of the country that, hey, we have to think about forming a stronger central government, because how are we ever going to stop anything like this ever again? Because there's no standing federal military at this time. Okay? So the Shays' Rebellion got the ball rolling that, number one, there was no power during this. And we're going to see this later on when basically nobody shows up to a convention. Maybe 4 or 5 out of the 13 states show up, and everybody throws their paper in there and says, this Articles of Confederation is completely flawed, and we have to start doing something else. We have to have a central government. And the debate is going to begin. That's going to be called the Constitutional Convention, the first Constitutional Convention, where we're going to begin creating our own constitution. That's what the next PowerPoint's going to be on in Chapter 2. So pay attention, be aware that that's going to be coming up tomorrow. Your homework for today, not homework, I should say, your classwork for today is going to be the Shays' Rebellion Q&A. Okay? That is worth 14 points. Make sure you do it in complete sentences. All right, everybody, have a nice day.